Chapter 1. No military present. The Cinderline War had lasted 10 months when the Orash Veyr came to Karad's rest. Compact records described the moon as strategically insignificant. Its military population was zero. Its orbital defenses had been dismantled 37 years earlier. No warships guarded its orbit. The Orash entered the system without resistance. Mine Superintendent Talun Kesher watched them arrive from a control chamber buried 6 kilometers beneath the surface. His 4 eyes followed the tactical display as black ships gathered above the moon. 100, 200. Then more emerged from behind the gas giant Karad. Their hollow centers glowed with pale energy. Talun belonged to the Galun, a short, broad species protected by overlapping green scales. Galun bodies were built for gravity heavier than the moon could provide, so magnetic boots held him firmly against the deck. His lower hands gripped the edge of the console. His upper hands remained folded behind his back. That posture was supposed to project calm. No one in the control chamber believed it. "Final count," Talun said. Communications Director Sava Pelin checked the orbital sensors. Sava was Ivara. 6 slender arms surrounded a narrow torso, and dark facial frills spread behind her head whenever she became alarmed. At that moment, the frills were fully extended. 284 warships, she said. 31 troop carriers. More contacts remain behind Karad. Any compact response? None. Human response? None. Sava hesitated. One signal arrived from Vaskir. The central display changed. A damaged recording filled the chamber. A hospital corridor appeared. Human Marines fired from behind overturned medical beds. Wounded soldiers dragged one another through smoke. An alien surgeon moved between them inside a clear water mantle. The message ended with 2 sentences written across the wall. Hold until Earth arrives. And when Earth cannot arrive, become the reason it still matters. The recording went dark. No one spoke. Karad's rest housed 120,000 miners, engineers, refinery workers, and their families. The moon possessed no army. The nearest compact fleet was 4 days away. The Orash would land in less than an hour. Talun closed the recording. Vaskir had Marines. Sava's frills lowered slightly. Yes. We have miners. A voice answered from the rear of the chamber. Same basic temperament. The speaker was human. Mara Venkataram stood beside an open maintenance panel with one hand buried inside the wiring. She was 68 standard years old. White threaded her dark hair. Wrinkles marked the corners of her brown eyes. Her orange mining coveralls had been patched so many times that little of the original fabric remained visible. Mara had served as Karad's chief infrastructure engineer for 29 years. She had been responsible for almost every system that kept the moon alive. Talun considered that a reason to respect her. It was not always a reason to enjoy speaking with her. "You are not a soldier," Talun said. "No. Neither are the other miners." "I checked. This is not humorous. Wasn't meant to be." Mara pulled a cable from the panel and connected it to an older control unit. The tactical display sharpened. Sava stared. "What did you do?" "Disconnected orbital tracking from the compact network. That network coordinates our sensors. That network is telling the Orash where our sensors are." Sava checked the external relays. 3 vanished from the display. Pale beams had cut them apart. The Orash were dismantling the moon's orbital infrastructure in precise order. Communications, navigation, cargo control, then power relays. They did not bombard the habitats. They did not need to. Karad's rest depended on machinery for air, heat, water, and gravity. Destroy enough systems, and the moon would kill its population without assistance. Talun opened the compact emergency channel. "This is Superintendent Talun Kesher of Karad's rest. We have an Orash occupation fleet in orbit. Request immediate military support." Static answered. Sava switched transmitters, the same message left through an industrial beacon, then a mining survey dish, then a buried emergency antenna. No response arrived. Mara closed the maintenance panel. "They heard us." Talun looked toward her. "You cannot know that." "No." "Then why say it?" "Because whether they heard us and can't help or heard us and won't help, the result is the same." Talun's scales tightened. Humans often confuse discouragement with honesty. We also confuse surrender with dying more slowly. The control chamber became quiet. Talun faced the human engineer. Karad's rest has no defenses. Myra looked around the room. The walls vibrated with the endless movement of mining equipment. Cargo trains passed through tunnels beneath them, drills cut into iron-rich stone. Ore crushers pounded deep inside the moon. Pumps circulated water through artificial caverns. Magnetic separators pulled valuable metals from rivers of crushed rock. Carad's rest was not silent. It was a machine the size of a world. Mara rested both hands on the console. It has no military defenses. That is what I said. No. The human's eyes remained on the orbital display. That isn't what you said. An Orash transmission entered every open channel. No image accompanied it, only a voice. Hundreds of tones spoke in perfect unison. Industrial satellite. Talon's translators struggled with the next phrase. Command organisms will present themselves. A list appeared. Talon Kesher, Sava Pelin, Mara Venkataram, 27 other administrators, engineers, and union coordinators. Infrastructure will be transferred. A map followed. Surface Port 1, Equatorial Freight Loop, Northern Extraction Pit, Deep Refinery, Cinderline Maintenance Station. Population will remain functional during processing. Talon studied the wording. Not alive. Functional. The Orash did not see workers. They saw biological components of industrial equipment. A deadline appeared, 40 minutes. Sava folded all 6 arms around herself. What happens if we surrender? Mara answered, they identify who understands the systems. And then they make sure no one else can rebuild them. Talon looked toward the list of names. You cannot prove that. Mara opened records from occupied worlds. Power engineers disappeared first, then communications workers, then medical specialists. The remaining populations were loaded into migration fleets. No destination had ever been confirmed. We cannot defeat them, Talon said. No. The answer came too quickly. He turned toward Mara. You agree? Of course. You just implied we should fight. I implied we shouldn't help them win. A warning tone sounded. Orash troop carriers separated from the orbital fleet. 31 black vessels descended toward the moon. Their landing paths divided. 10 toward Surface Port 1, 8 toward the northern pit, 6 toward the refinery vents. The rest approached the equatorial cargo terminals. They had studied Carad's rest before entering the system. They knew where every official route led. Mara enlarged the map. Good. Talon stared at her. Good. They're landing where the plans tell them to land. Those are our most important facilities. No. Mara touched the display. The official map showed 4 major mining zones. Surface Port 1, Northern Extraction, Deep Refinery, Equatorial Freight. Beneath them, she activated another layer. The moon filled with lines. Thousands of tunnels appeared. Some were abandoned. Some had never entered compact records. Others connected facilities that were supposed to remain separate. Old cargo shafts, emergency air routes, manual rail bypasses, water reservoirs, seismic relief chambers, maintenance corridors built before Carad's rest joined the compact. Talon leaned closer. What is this? The moon. These routes are not registered. They didn't need to be. Some connect directly beneath residential sectors. Emergency evacuation tunnels. They connect to ore accelerators. Also true. Sava pointed toward a circular route running around the moon's equator. The freight loop was decommissioned. The computers were decommissioned, Mara said. The rails still work. Talon saw more hidden systems, manual valves beside automated pumps, independent generators beneath each habitat. Mechanical switches inside cargo junctions, old drilling lasers mounted on rotating platforms, ore haulers with armored cabs, maintenance drones isolated from the network. Why were these systems preserved? He asked. Mara looked at him. Because every time someone proposed removing them, a human engineer asked what would happen when the new system failed. They are inefficient. Yes. Redundant. Yes. Expensive to maintain. Yes. And you kept them. Yes. The first Orash landers entered the atmosphere. Mara enlarged Surface Port 1. Superintendent, the Orash think they're invading a mine. They are. No. The human engineer's face hardened. They're invading 30 years of safety violations, unofficial repairs, union arguments, abandoned equipment, and people who know exactly which machines can be pushed past their limits. The control chamber lights flickered. The Orash had begun shutting down surface power. Talon looked toward the population figures, 120,000 people, families. Workers, children, none trained for war. He had spent his life believing his first responsibility was to keep them away from danger. Now danger had come into the mine. "What do you propose?" he asked. Mara opened every maintenance channel on Karad's Rest. "First, we let them land." Talon's scales pulled tight, and then... The human engineer looked toward the approaching troop carriers. "Then we teach them what the equipment is for." Above the moon, the Orash fleet opened its hollow centers. The invasion began. Chapter 2. The Old Systems. The Orash captured Surface Port 1 in 7 minutes. No one resisted. Cargo crews abandoned the landing fields. Traffic controllers left their stations. Mining tugs powered down beside their docking cradles. The Orash entered an intact facility. That was exactly what Mara wanted. Talon watched through buried optical cameras as enemy machines marched down the cargo ramps. They moved on 3 jointed limbs. White ceramic plates covered their bodies. Black fluid shifted through the spaces between them. Each machine carried a cutting weapon and a compact gravity projector. They did not speak. They scanned. The landing fields were empty. The control rooms were warm. Cargo manifests remained open. Ore haulers waited in orderly lines. Everything suggested panic. Nothing suggested a trap. Talon looked toward Mara. "You ordered the workers to leave tools behind." "Some tools." "Several fusion cutters remain active." "Do they?" Talon checked the controls. The fusion cutters were broadcasting operational status. Their fuel lines had been removed. Mara had left the screens alive, not the machines. "What is the purpose?" "Teach them to trust the network." Sava turned from communications. "Enemy units have entered northern extraction." Talon switched views. The northern pit extended 80 kilometers across the surface. Terraced roads spiraled down into darkness. Drilling towers stood along the rim. Ore elevators connected the lowest levels to underground processing plants. 20,000 workers had evacuated into the old tunnels. The Orash landed at the pit's official command center. They found it operating automatically. Conveyor belts moved. Elevators descended. Drilling towers transmitted normal production data. The enemy followed the signals. Mara marked their route. "They're heading toward the central elevator." "That elevator reaches the lower habitats," Talon said. "No. The plans show." "The plans are wrong." Mara opened an older diagram. The official elevator shaft ended at level 40. The physical shaft continued to level 83. A manual junction could divert the car into an abandoned extraction tunnel. The Orash entered the elevator. Human miners watched through a wired camera. A foreman's voice entered the control chamber. "North team ready." Her name was Prisha Cade. She had spent 21 years operating deep extraction machinery and had lost 3 fingers to a machine that compact inspectors later described as acceptably safe. Mara answered. "Wait until the car passes 50. "Understood." Talon watched the indicator descend. 40, 45, 50. Prisha pulled the manual junction lever. The rail shifted. The elevator car turned sideways into the abandoned tunnel. Orash gravity projectors activated. The car slowed. Mara expected that. "Release counterweight." Prisha cut the upper cable. An 800-ton counterweight fell through the main shaft. The elevator's emergency brakes tried to engage. They were attached to the official control network. The Orash had already disabled it. The counterweight struck. The elevator car shot through the abandoned tunnel. It traveled 12 kilometers before reaching an ore crusher. Prisha activated the machine. The camera went dark. Talon stared. "How many enemy units?" 112, Sava said. The control chamber remained silent. Talon had seen death during mine disasters, crushed workers, burned crews, bodies recovered after decompression. Those deaths had been failures. This was intentional. His scales felt cold. Mara did not celebrate. She simply opened the next map. "Surface Port 1 is connecting to cargo control." The Orash had reached the central traffic system. A pale signal moved through the network. They attempted to take command of every autonomous vehicle on the moon. Talon expected alarms. None came. The automated ore haulers continued moving. Orash machines entered them. The vehicles accepted new destinations. Then the old systems activated. Each hauler's manual maintenance controller disconnected from the network. Human operators took command through buried cables. The first convoy accelerated. Orash machines tried to stop it. The vehicles ignored them. 30 ore haulers drove across Surface Port 1 at full speed. They did not collide with the enemy. They drove toward the cargo elevators. The elevator doors opened. The vehicles entered. Then the lifts descended. Sava looked toward Mara. "Where are you taking them?" "Not us." A voice entered from the tunnels. Human operator Iman Baptiste laughed over the radio. "Hope they like the refinery." The cargo lifts carried the Orash vehicles down 3 kilometers. Then they stopped between levels. Maintenance doors opened. Molten slag poured into the shafts. The transmission ended. Talon's lower hands curled against the console. "Your people are enjoying this. They've been waiting years to destroy company equipment without paperwork." "That is not reassuring." "It isn't meant to be." The Orash occupation force reacted. Enemy signals spread across the surface. Troop carriers rose from Surface Port 1 and moved toward the residential habitats. Mara's expression changed. "They're abandoning the infrastructure." "They have identified the population as leverage," Talon said. The first plan had worked. The Orash had entered the official facilities. They had lost hundreds of machines. Now they were adapting. "They will attack the habitats," Sava said. Talon opened a moon-wide channel. Evacuation groups moved to Deep Shelter 9 and the surrounding refinery caverns. Abandon upper residential sectors. Responses entered from across Karad's Rest. Galun families moved through freight tunnels. Human miners guided children into emergency lifts. Ivara workers climbed through ventilation shafts. Brackish crews carried pressure shelters on their backs. The evacuation routes did not appear on official maps, but they converged beneath the deep refinery. Shelter 9 had been built after a reactor accident 60 years earlier. Its original chambers could hold 40,000 people. The adjoining ore vaults, maintenance galleries, and cooling caverns offered room for more. Room was not the same as air. Talon looked toward Mara. "You said the old shelters were connected." "They are." "The life support systems cannot sustain the full population." "Not yet." Mara called the water processing crews. "Redirect oxygen cracking to the refinery caverns. Open emergency circulation between Shelter 9 and storage vaults 4 through 11. "That removes oxygen from the upper habitats," Talon said. "The upper habitats are being evacuated." "Not all workers have left." "They will." "You cannot know that." Myra looked toward him. "No." That answer again? Humans admitted uncertainty too easily. Talon found it infuriating and strangely trustworthy. The first Orash carrier reached Habitat 3. Its machines entered through the surface locks. They found empty corridors. Lights remained on. Food still warmed in communal kitchens. A child's toy rolled across the floor. The enemy scanned for life. Thousands of signals appeared beneath them. The Orash cut through the floor. The signals moved deeper. They cut again. The signals scattered. Mara had attached medical monitors to maintenance drones. The Orash chased false heartbeats through service tunnels. Meanwhile, the population moved in the opposite direction. Sava's frills lowered. "That will delay them." 6 minutes, Mara said. "How do you know?" "I tested it." Talon stared. "When?" 3 years ago." "Why did you test whether medical monitors could confuse an invasion force?" "I tested whether search drones could locate trapped miners." "That is not the same thing." "Same sensors." Talon began to understand. The humans had not spent decades preparing Karad's Rest for war. They had prepared it for failure. Cave-ins, power loss, network collapse, reactor accidents, broken lifts, lost crews, systems that could not speak to one another. The Orash had turned those precautions into weapons by becoming another disaster. An alarm sounded. Sava looked toward the orbital feed. "The enemy is deploying seismic projectors." Mara froze. Black devices descended toward the northern pit and equatorial freight stations. They anchored to the surface. Pale energy entered the moon. Talon felt the first vibration beneath his boots. Dust fell from the ceiling. "What are they doing?" Sava asked. Mara opened the geological map. They found the hidden tunnels. Another pulse entered the rock. Abandoned shafts collapsed. One of the evacuation routes disappeared from the display. 3,000 life signs remained inside it. Talon's blood chilled. Can we reach them? Mara checked the route. The western access is gone. Eastern. Orash units control it. Then open another. The nearest mobile drill platform is 20 kilometers away. Move it. Too slow. A third seismic pulse struck. More tunnels collapsed. The Orash did not need to enter the underground network. They could bury everyone inside it. Talon looked toward the trapped life signs. Compact disaster doctrine was clear. Seal the damaged sector. Preserve air for the larger population. 3,000 workers against more than 100,000. The arithmetic was simple. Talon opened the emergency controls. Seal Western Tunnel 6. Mara caught his wrist. No. They are consuming reserve air. They're alive. The Orash are collapsing the route. Then we make another route. You said we cannot reach them. I said the drill platform is too slow. Mara looked toward the equatorial freight loop. The old cargo rails circled half the moon. They connected directly to a tunnel boring machine stored beneath Refinery 2. Talon understood the possibility, then the risk. The freight loop passes beneath an occupied surface port. Yes. Activating it will reveal the lower network. Yes. It may guide the Orash directly to Shelter 9. Yes. 3,000 people are trapped. Yes. 100,000 are still moving toward safety. Yes. Talon's upper hands trembled. He had spent his life making decisions like this. Close one shaft to preserve another. Sacrifice equipment to save workers. Abandon bodies when recovery endangered the living. But the trapped miners were not bodies, not yet. Superintendent, Sava said quietly, we need an order. Talon looked toward the life signs, 3,000 points of light. Myra released his wrist. She did not tell him what to choose. That made the choice worse. Talon closed the tunnel ceiling controls. Activate the freight loop. Sava stared. The Orash will see it. Yes. Myra moved toward the manual rail console. What destination? Talon looked at the trapped miners. Bring the drill home. Across Kared's Rest, decommissioned cargo rails began to hum. The old systems woke, and the Orash heard them. Chapter 3. The plan beneath the plan. The equatorial freight loop had not carried ore in 18 years. Its magnetic rails still worked. Mostly. Mara's engineers restored power section by section. Old capacitors charged, mechanical switches closed, emergency generators activated inside abandoned stations. The tunnel boring machine sat beneath Refinery 2. It was called Gertrude. Talon did not know why. Humans had named most large mining equipment. Some names were formal, others were insults. Gertrude was 400 meters long and weighed nearly 60,000 tons. A circular drill head filled the front. Fusion cutters surrounded the outer rim. The machine had once carved transit tunnels through Kared's iron mantle. It had been retired because its guidance system no longer met compact standards. Human workers had maintained it anyway. Mara opened a channel. Gertrude team status. A brackish engineer answered. Old, angry, leaking coolant and ready. I meant the machine. So did I. Myra looked toward Talon. See, multispecies cultural alignment. The freight loop activated. Magnetic fields pulled Gertrude from its storage cradle. The boring machine entered the equatorial tunnel. Its engines pushed against rusted rails. The first kilometers passed slowly. Then the loop accelerated it. 50 kilometers per hour, 100, 300. The moon vibrated around it. Orash seismic projectors detected the movement. Enemy carriers changed course. They know where it is, Sava said. They know where we want them to look, Mara replied. Gertrude reached the occupied freight station beneath Surface Port 1. Orash machines entered the tunnel ahead of it. They deployed gravity fields. The rails bent. The boring machine slowed. Mara's crews disconnected automatic guidance. Brackish engineers inside Gertrude turned manual wheels. Hydraulic systems forced the drill head downward. The machine left the rail. It entered solid rock. The Orash had blocked the tunnel. Gertrude made another. Fusion cutters turned iron stone into white vapor. The boring machine passed beneath the enemy position and continued toward the trapped miners. Talon watched the progress. Estimated arrival. 11 minutes, Mara said. The trapped section has 8 minutes of air. Then someone needs to be wrong. A voice entered from Western Tunnel 6. Foreman Prisha Cade. Static broke her transmission. Superintendent, we have 2,912 alive. You have 8 minutes of air. 6 after the last collapse. Talon's lower hands tightened. Gertrude is approaching from the south. We hear it. The transmission carried a low rumble. Miners cheered in the background. Then Prisha's voice hardened. Orash machines are cutting through the eastern wall. The enemy had found the trapped workers first. Mara checked the tunnel map. Can you defend the breach? We have 4 cutting torches and a cargo loader. How much explosive? We're miners. Mara almost smiled. Right, stupid question. Talon opened the channel. Prisha, hold until Gertrude reaches you. The words left him before he considered them. Hold, the phrase that had spread from Neuralis, from Serene, from Vaskir. No one promised rescue would arrive, only that someone was moving, Prisha answered. We'll keep the tunnel untidy. The transmission ended. The Orash attacked. Miners welded metal plates across the breach. Enemy cutters opened them. Workers detonated small charges in the walls. Rock buried the first machines. More entered. A cargo loader struck one and pinned it against the ceiling. The loader's operator died when the Orash cut through the cab. Another miner took control from the rear platform. The machine continued. Gertrude accelerated. 9 minutes. 7, 5. The trapped tunnel's air fell below survivable levels. Workers shared emergency masks. Galun miners required less oxygen and gave their supplies to humans and Ivara. Brackish workers carried unconscious people toward the approaching vibration. The wall began to glow. Gertrude was close. Orash machines entered the shelter chamber. Prisha Cade activated every remaining explosive. The blast collapsed the eastern entrance. It also destroyed the chamber's final air seal. Atmosphere vanished into the broken shaft. People fell. Then Gertrude broke through the southern wall. The drill head entered the chamber in a storm of molten stone. Emergency doors opened along its sides. Brackish engineers dragged miners aboard. Human medics distributed oxygen masks. Mechanical arms pulled pressure tanks into the machine. The trapped workers entered by the hundreds. The Orash cut through the collapsed eastern passage. Gertrude reversed. Its old rail clamps failed. Mara heard the report. Use the drill. To reverse, the brackish engineer asked. To climb. Gertrude turned its drill head downward. Fusion cutters bit into the floor. The machine angled upward through untouched rock. It carved its own escape route. Orash machines followed. Myra opened another control panel. Where does that tunnel emerge? Sava checked the projected path. Beneath surface port 1. Talon looked toward her. That facility is occupied. Yes. How many enemy units? More than 4,000. Gertrude carried nearly 3,000 rescued miners. It was heading directly beneath the largest Orash force on the moon. Mara studied the route. Good. Talon's scales tightened. You continue using that word incorrectly. Mara enlarged the port foundations. The landing field rested on reinforced basalt pillars. Cargo tunnels ran between them. Fuel lines filled the western side. Empty ore tanks filled the east. Gertrude approached from below. What are you planning? Talon asked. Exit strategy. For the miners. For the port. Gertrude reached the lower foundation. Its fusion cutters angled upward. The machine struck the port's eastern support field. Orash machines gathered above it. Mara ordered the ore tanks opened. Thousands of tons of powdered iron poured into the tunnel. Magnetic separators activated. The powder accelerated around Gertrude. A metallic storm filled the foundation. Orash gravity fields pulled the particles aside. That was the response Mara expected. The redirected iron struck the fuel lines. Human miners detonated them. Surface Port 1 rose from the moon. The eastern landing field broke apart. Orash troop carriers tilted as the ground vanished beneath them. Gertrude emerged through the collapsing port. Its drill head struck an enemy lander. The black vessel split. Emergency hatches opened along Gertrude's upper hull. Miners fired cutting tools into nearby machines. Ore haulers accelerated from hidden garages. They surrounded the boring machine. The rescue convoy drove into the northern tunnels. Talon watched the life signs move to safety. 2,704 survivors. More than 200 had died. 3,000 had not been sealed away. Myra looked toward him. You chose correctly. No. Talon's voice sounded harsher than he intended. I chose people. The result does not make the choice correct. Mara studied him, then nodded, fair. An alarm interrupted them. The Orash fleet had changed formation. Half the ships in orbit moved away from Carad's Cinderline beacon. They turned toward the moon. Enemy command had recognized that the occupation force was losing. They are preparing orbital fire, Sava said. Talon looked toward the population. Most had reached Shelter 9 and the surrounding refinery caverns, not all. Thousands remained in transit or isolated behind collapsed routes. The moon could survive limited bombardment. The habitats could not. Mara examined the orbital vectors. They won't destroy Carad's rest. How do you know? They want the infrastructure. They have already lost the port. That makes the rest more valuable. The first Orash warships entered low orbit. Their hollow centers opened. Pale targeting beams crossed the surface. Northern extraction, the deep refinery, the equatorial freight stations, every facility connected to Mara's defense. The Orash had stopped trying to capture the moon intact. They would cut away everything that resisted. Talon looked toward Mara. What remains? Drilling lasers. Too weak to reach orbit. Cargo rails. Too short to accelerate military projectiles. Ore haulers. They cannot fly. Refinery slag. It falls. Mara smiled faintly, usually. Sava's frills spread. What are you thinking? Mara opened the complete map of Carad's rest. The equatorial freight loop glowed beneath the surface. It ran halfway around the moon. Mining stations connected to it through launch shafts. Ore containers had once accelerated through the loop before rising to surface processors. The rails had never been intended as weapons. The same could be said of almost everything else on Carad's rest. We've been trying to fight the ships that landed, Mara said. Talon looked toward the warships above them. And now? The first orbital beam struck northern extraction. Stone rose into the sky. Carad's rest shook from pole to pole. Mara placed both hands on the freight loop controls. Now we fight the ones that didn't. Chapter 4. What miners do. The equatorial freight loop could accelerate cargo to 8 kilometers per second. That was enough to move ore efficiently across the moon. It was not enough to threaten an Orash warship. Mara needed more. She called every surviving engineer on Carad's rest. Human, Galun, Ivara, Brakesh, Seneti, no military command connected them, no officer assigned stations. Mara described the problem, then she asked one question. What can we break safely? The answers arrived immediately. Safety regulators, cargo tolerances, magnetic cooling limits, rail synchronization, station walls, insurance law. Talon listened as engineers volunteered decades of accumulated resentment. One freight supervisor knew the rails could handle 30% more load because he had once falsified a report after an overload. A human electrician had installed illegal bypasses around 3 magnetic substations. A Brakesh mechanic knew which support arches could be removed without collapsing the tunnel immediately. An Ivara surveyor had mapped a straighter route through abandoned shafts. None of those modifications had been approved. Together, they created a weapon. Mara divided the freight loop into 12 independent acceleration zones. Each zone would push the same cargo carrier, then release it before the magnetic rails failed. The carrier would enter an old launch shaft beneath the equator. Drilling lasers would open the surface cap. If the timing held, the projectile would leave Carad's rest at 32 kilometers per second. Still too slow, Sava pointed toward the gas giant above them. The giant's gravity. Objects launched toward the correct point would fall toward Carad, then curve around it. Mara understood. We don't fire at the ships. Talon saw it next. We fire ahead of them. A cargo carrier launched along an orbital intercept could gain speed while falling through the gas giant's gravity well. The planet would provide the rest. Mara looked toward Sava. Can you calculate the curve? With the network. No network. Sava's 6 arms moved across separate consoles. Then I need the old navigation observatory. It's on the surface. It has optical instruments. Orash units control the crater around it. Sava folded her arms. I did not say the location was convenient. Talon looked at the observatory map. A maintenance tunnel reached within 2 kilometers of the surface complex. Its escape shaft connected to the outer sections of the freight loop. Sending workers there would risk lives for a firing solution that might not work. Before he could object, Sava removed her communications harness. "I will go." "You are not a surveyor," Talon said. "I directed orbital traffic for 14 years. You also coordinate every evacuation channel. Everyone alive and reachable is moving through local routes now. The network is no longer helping them. You cannot know the evacuation is complete." "No." Sava's frills lowered. "But we know what happens if the ships remain overhead." Myra looked toward Talon. The decision belonged to him. Again, he hated that. "Take 12 miners," he said, "no more." Sava's frills lifted. 8. 12. 10. Myra interrupted. 11. The universe loves primes. Neither understood the reasoning. They accepted it anyway. Sava's team entered the maintenance tunnel. Above them, Orash warships continued firing. The northern pit vanished beneath expanding clouds of stone. The deep refinery lost 2 surface vents. Heat rose inside the lower levels. Shelter 9's cooling system began to fail. Talon checked the population. 115,000 survivors had reached Shelter 9, the storage vaults, and the surrounding refinery caverns. Carbon dioxide climbed. Water rationing began. Thousands more signals had vanished during the bombardment. The Orash did not need to enter the shelters. Time would kill the moon for them. Myra's engineers prepared the first projectile. They selected an ore carrier the size of a tower. It contained refined tungsten. Mining charges were packed around the cargo. No guidance system was installed. Only a mechanical release timer. Talon examined it. "You intend to strike a moving warship with an unguided container." "Correct." "From beneath the surface." "Correct." "Using rails that have not operated together in 18 years." "Correct." "You appear calm." "I'm exhausted." An alarm sounded from Shelter 9. Orash machines had entered the ventilation system. Talon turned toward the map. "How?" The enemy had followed oxygen flow through collapsed tunnels. 3 groups moved toward the shelter from separate routes. The nearest would reach the outer air chamber in 12 minutes. Myra looked toward the freight loop. "If we divert power to defense, we lose the launch window. If we do not, the shelter is breached." The dilemma appeared on the power display. The freight loop required every surviving reactor. The ventilation defenses required 3 of them. Talon stared at the numbers. The moon could fire once, or it could defend the people beneath it, not both. "Stop the loop," he said. Myra did not argue. She began shutting down the acceleration zones. Talon looked toward her. "That easily." "There are 115,000 people inside those caverns. The warships will continue bombardment." "Yes." "We may not have another opportunity." "Yes." "You agree with me?" Myra opened the ventilation map. "Of course." Talon's scales shifted. "Why?" "Because weapons are equipment." She looked toward the shelter life signs. "People are the reason we use them." The answer struck deeper than disagreement would have. Myra divided miners into 3 teams. The shelter possessed no weapons strong enough to stop the Orash. It did possess pressure doors, air pumps, refinery heat, water lines, and an ore hauler service tunnel running past all 3 enemy approaches. Myra opened the hauler garages. 50 vehicles remained. Each weighed 900 tons. Their cabs were armored against falling stone. Their engines were designed for steep grades. Their operators were angry. Talon opened the moon-wide channel. "Hauler crews, enemy units are approaching Shelter 9. A human voice answered, "Direction." 3 tunnels. "Road condition." "Poor." The operator laughed. Finally, something familiar. The haulers moved. The first group entered the western ventilation tunnel. The route was too narrow for 2 vehicles side by side. The lead driver accelerated. Orash machines fired gravity pulses. The hauler's front wheels lifted. Its rear wheels continued pushing. The vehicle struck the ceiling, rolled, and blocked the tunnel. The driver ejected into a service recess. The second hauler rammed the first. Together, they crushed the enemy machines between them. In the eastern tunnel, miners opened refinery heat lines. Superheated gas flooded the passage. The Orash adapted their armor. Then a hauler drove through the gas carrying magnetized ore. The particles coated the white ceramic shells. Human crews activated industrial magnets behind the walls. The enemy machines slammed sideways into the rock. In the central tunnel, the Orash reached the outer shelter door. Talon watched them cut through. Thousands of civilians waited beyond the inner seal. No first acceleration zone. She smiled. Talon recognized the expression. What? We stopped the launch. Yes. We didn't unload the projectile. Mara activated one section. Not enough to fire into orbit, enough to move the carrier. The mass of tungsten accelerated through the underground loop. It reached the central junction. Emergency rails redirected it upward. The carrier struck the Orash from beneath. The tunnel floor became a wall of tungsten. Enemy machines vanished. The carrier continued into an abandoned ore chamber and stopped. Shelter 9 remained sealed. Talon exhaled. The reactors returned power to the freight loop. But the interruption had cost 19 minutes. The Orash warships changed orbit. Their original intercept path no longer mattered. Sava had not returned from the observatory. No firing solution remained. Mara checked the orbital tracks. We missed the window. Can we calculate another? Talon asked. Not accurately. A communications signal entered through a buried laser line. Sava, her voice was weak. Observatory team to deep control. Talon leaned toward the receiver. Report. We reached the telescope. Casualties. 3. Enemy. Outside. Sava transmitted optical readings, precise positions for every Orash ship in low orbit. Mara fed them into the manual calculator. New intercept arcs appeared. One passed through the freight loop's launch corridor. When? Talon asked. Mara looked toward the timer. 6 minutes. Can the loop charge? 8. Talon stared. What can we remove? Cooling. What happens without it? The rails melt. After launch. During. Can they hold for 6 minutes? Mara did not answer. She called the engineers. Every acceleration zone reported separately. Zone 1 could hold for 7 minutes. Zone 2 for 5. Zone 3 had already lost insulation. Zone 4's magnetic supports were cracked. Zone 5's manual switch had welded shut. The loop could not reach full power, not as one system. Talon remembered the battle report from Serene, the ammunition ship that became 8 supply stations, the admiral who stopped giving the enemy 1 fleet to kill. Do not synchronize the zones, he said. Mara looked toward him. What? Activate each section only when the projectile reaches it. The timing will be manual. Yes. 1 delay ruins the launch. Then do not delay. Mara smiled. This time Talon understood why. The freight loop divided. 12 crews took control of 12 rail sections. No network connected them. Each watched for the approaching projectile through old optical sensors. Each would activate at the moment it entered. The Orash could not corrupt a firing sequence that existed only in 12 separate mines. Mara opened the rail channel. Zone crews 1 pass. A Galun supervisor answered from Zone 1. Ready. Brackish engineers confirmed Zone 2. Human electricians confirmed Zone 3. Ivara surveyors confirmed Zone 4. One by one, all 12 answered. Mara looked toward Talon. Superintendent authorized launch. He looked at the moon, at 115,000 people beneath the surface, at Sava trapped inside the observatory, at miners waiting beside rails already beginning to glow. Karad's rest had no military. It had something less orderly. Launch, Talon said. The first magnetic zone activated. The moon began to fire. Chapter 5. Karad's rest. The tungsten carrier moved through the equatorial freight loop. Zone 1 accelerated it. The rails turned orange. The carrier entered Zone 2. Brackish engineers pulled the manual switch. Magnetic fields struck the container. Its speed doubled. Zone 1 failed behind it. The rails melted into the tunnel floor. No second shot would follow. The carrier entered Zone 3. Human electricians activated stolen power from the residential grid. Lights failed throughout Shelter 9. Children cried in the dark. The projectile accelerated. Zone 3 exploded. 2 engineers died. The carrier continued. Orash sensors detected the magnetic surge. Warships changed orbit. Their hollow centers opened. Pale gravity fields reached toward the moon. Sava watched them through the observatory telescope. They know, she transmitted. Mara checked the intercept. They don't know what. The carrier entered Zone 4. Ivara surveyors activated the rail early. The field caught the front of the container and pulled it sideways. Warning alarms sounded. The projectile scraped the tunnel wall. Tungsten tore through stone. Myra saw the trajectory change. Zone 5, compensate 3 degrees inward. The Zone 5 switch was welded shut. A human mechanic named Orash Veyr placed a mining charge against it. His crew took cover. The charge detonated. The switch moved. Zone 5 activated. The carrier returned to the center of the loop. Orash laughed through smoke. Precision engineering. The projectile reached Zone 6, then 7. Then 8. Each rail section died after use. The freight loop collapsed behind the carrier one piece at a time. The Orash identified the launch shaft. 3 warships fired. Pale beams struck the surface above it. Stone collapsed into the shaft. Sava saw the impact. The exit is blocked. Myra looked toward the drilling platforms. Open it. Surface crews activated every remaining drilling laser. The beams struck the collapsed rock from below. They cut slowly, too slowly. The tungsten carrier entered Zone 9. Speed climbed past 20 kilometers per second. Zone 10 waited. The launch shaft remained closed. Talon opened the mining channel. What equipment is near the surface cap? A brackish foreman answered. 2 ore haulers, 1 excavator. Can they clear it? Not before launch. Myra looked toward the refinery pressure system. Slag vents. Talon understood. The deep refinery stored molten waste beneath the launch shaft. Emergency vents connected the chambers. Opening them would release pressure upward. It would also destroy the refinery. Without the refinery, Carad's Rest would lose its economic purpose. The moon might never recover. Myra studied the pressure readings. Venting the slag will destroy the lower processing chambers. Yes, Talon said, we may never reopen them. Yes. Compact Command will classify the moon as non-viable. Talon placed all 4 hands on the controls. The compact is not here. He opened the valves. Molten slag entered the emergency vents. Pressure built beneath the launch shaft. The surface cap ruptured. Rock, metal, and white fire erupted into space. The launch corridor opened. Zone 11 activated. The tungsten carrier accelerated through the final curve. The rails failed. The container left them. For one terrible second, it drifted inside the shaft. Zone 12 had not fired. Myra opened the channel. Zone 12 report. Static answered. The final rail station had taken a direct orbital hit. Its main control room was gone. Without the last acceleration field, the carrier would not clear the moon. Talon looked toward the map. No one in deep control could reach Zone 12 before the projectile arrived. Then another signal entered. Weak. Sava Pelin. The observatory's emergency shaft connected to the freight loop less than a kilometer from Zone 12. Sava and the surviving members of her team had used it to escape the surface. Her facial frills were burned. One arm hung useless. 2 miners supported her. We reached the final capacitor chamber, she said. Talon stared. You were ordered to return to shelter. The route was inconvenient. Myra leaned toward the channel. Can you activate the field? Primary controls are destroyed. Manual capacitor release. Intact. It requires 2 stations. Sava looked toward the survivors beside her. There are 3 of us. Orash machines entered the shaft behind them. Sava's team sealed the door. White cutting light appeared through the metal. Myra transmitted the timing. Release when the carrier reaches the marker. Sava looked toward Talon. Her facial frills settled against her neck. Superintendent. Yes. Was this in the emergency plan? No. Good. The tungsten carrier approached Zone 12. The marker changed. Sava and the miners pulled the capacitor releases. The final acceleration field activated. Every light in deep control turned white. The carrier shot upward. It crossed the launch shaft. Molten slag followed it into space. The projectile left Carad's Rest. Zone 12 exploded. Sava's signal disappeared. Talon stared at the empty channel. No time for grief, only memory. The tungsten carrier entered open space. Orash warships adjusted their gravity fields. The projectile was too slow to strike them directly. It was not aimed at them. It passed ahead of the formation. Then the gas giant's gravity caught it. The carrier curved downward. Its speed increased. The Orash detected the changing trajectory. Ships scattered. Their formation opened. That was the second purpose of the shot. Drilling lasers fired from Carad's Rest, not at the warships. At the cloud of molten slag following the projectile, the lasers spread it into a glowing sheet. Orash gravity fields activated to deflect the debris. Every ship adjusted differently. Their perfect formation broke. The tungsten carrier completed its curve. It struck the first Orash warship through the side. The black hull vanished. The carrier continued. Mining charges detonated. Tungsten fragments crossed low orbit at impossible speed. They struck 5 more ships, then 9. The surviving Orash vessels bent the remaining fragments away. Toward Karad's rest, Mara saw the return path. Shelter impact in 40 seconds. Talon looked toward the fragments. Thousands, too many to stop. The moon had fired. The enemy had turned the shot back. Mara opened every surviving drilling platform. Target incoming debris. The lasers fired. They could not destroy the tungsten. They changed it. Heat spread across the fragments. Some melted. Others cracked. Ore haulers moved across the surface and raised armored dump beds over exposed vents and shelter entrances. Excavators positioned reinforced buckets above emergency shafts. Mining tugs lifted from damaged ports and dragged shield plates across the largest openings. Karad's rest protected itself with everything it had left. Tungsten rain struck the moon. The surface disappeared beneath white impacts. Tunnels collapsed. Power failed across 3 sectors. Deep control shook. The ceiling split. Talon fell. Mara pulled him behind a console as stone struck the deck. The bombardment lasted 12 seconds. Then silence returned. Emergency lights activated. Sava's orbital telescope was gone. Surface Port 1 was gone. Northern extraction was gone. Half the freight loop had melted. The deep refinery burned beneath kilometers of stone. Karad's rest remained. Sava's final firing solution had opened the Orash formation. The enemy command carrier hung exposed above the equator. Mara looked toward the remaining infrastructure. 1 launch shaft, no freight loop, no tungsten carriers, no second shot. The Orash command ship descended. Its gravity field pressed against the moon. Cracks opened across the surface. "They're going to collapse the shelter complex," Mara said. Talon forced himself upright. His lower left arm hung at an unnatural angle. "How long?" 5 minutes. Mara studied the enemy carrier. It hovered above the destroyed launch shaft. Confident, close, too close. "What remains beneath that shaft?" she asked. Talon checked the map. "Refinery waste channels." "Anything else?" "Geothermal boreholes." "How deep?" 400 kilometers. Mara looked toward him. The idea required no explanation. Talon felt the moon tremble beneath his feet. Geothermal boreholes carried heat from Karad's interior to the refineries. Emergency shutters kept pressure contained. Opening them all at once would release a column of superheated gas, molten stone, and magnetic debris through the launch shaft. It might destroy the command carrier. It might also fracture the equatorial crust. Karad's rest could lose the shelters. "What is the safe pressure?" Talon asked. Mara checked. "There isn't one." Of course, Talon opened the moon-wide channel. "All shelter sectors brace for structural shock." Mara moved toward the geothermal controls. "If the crust fails, everyone dies," she said. "If we do nothing, everyone dies. We cannot know the eruption will reach the ship. No. We cannot know the shelters will survive. No." Talon looked toward the life signs beneath the moon. The superintendent had spent his life preserving the mine. The tunnels, the equipment, the production schedules. The people, he finally understood that only one of those mattered without condition. "Open the boreholes," Talon said. Mara disengaged the automatic regulators. Mechanical wheels appeared on 12 separate control stations. Workers across deep control took positions. Galun, Human, Ivara, Brackish, no network linked them. Mara raised one hand. On 3. The Orash command carrier opened its hollow center. Pale energy descended toward the moon. 1. Shelter 9's walls began to crack. 2. The workers gripped the wheels. 3. They turned. Deep inside Karad's rest, geothermal shutters opened. Pressure entered the boreholes. The moon groaned. The sound traveled through every tunnel, through every shelter, through every piece of machinery the miners had built. The equatorial launch shaft erupted. A column of molten stone struck the Orash command carrier. Its gravity field held for less than a second, then failed. The ship split open. Fire entered its hollow center. The command carrier rose on the eruption like a black fragment caught in a furnace. It broke apart above Karad's rest. Across the moon, Orash machines stopped. Some collapsed. Others staggered as distant ships attempted to restore control. Miners emerged from tunnels. They carried cutting tools, drills, industrial explosives, cargo hooks. The occupation force had entered expecting civilians. It met a population whose survival depended upon understanding machines, stone, pressure, heat, and failure. The miners attacked. At northern extraction, ore haulers drove Orash machines into open pits. At the ruins of Surface Port 1, cargo crews used magnetic cranes to lift enemy units from the ground and drop them into slag pools. Inside the equatorial tunnels, brackish workers advanced behind excavator shields. Human engineers cut enemy limbs with fusion torches. Galun miners collapsed routes behind retreating units. Ivara surveyors guided teams through ventilation shafts. No central command directed the battle. Every mine fought what it could reach. The Orash occupation force broke. Surviving troop carriers attempted to leave. Drilling lasers tracked them. Mining tugs attached cargo cables. One carrier reached orbit. 2 escaped beyond the moon. The others fell. 6 hours after the invasion began, the last coordinated Orash signal vanished from Karad's rest. The moon had possessed no military. It won anyway. Chapter 6. What the records changed. Karad's rest survived. That statement required explanation. Surface Port 1 no longer existed. Northern extraction had become a crater. The deep refinery burned for 11 days. Half the equatorial freight loop had melted into the surrounding rock. 3 habitat sectors remained without power. The geothermal eruption altered the moon's rotation by an amount too small to affect daily life and large enough to occupy engineers for years. 12,600 people died. 107,400 survived. Among the dead was Sava Pellin. Her observatory team recovered the firing solution that made the first orbital strike possible. No body was found. Talun placed her name above the entrance to deep control, not below his, not beneath a list of administrators, above the door where every worker would see it before entering. Myra Venkataram survived with a broken hip, 3 fractured ribs, and burns along both arms. She refused medical retirement. Talun overruled her. Mara ignored him. Their relationship returned to normal. 3 weeks after the battle, the first compact relief ships entered the system. They came with military escorts, hundreds of them. They found miners repairing the surface. Ore haulers moved broken enemy hulls. Drilling crews reopened collapsed shelters. Children painted white broken circles on cargo doors. The compact admiral commanding the relief fleet entered deep control wearing an immaculate uniform. His name was Morse Thane. He belonged to the Senate. Silver vapor moved inside his chest chamber. "Superintendent Kesher," he said, "I have reviewed the battle reports." Talun's injured arm rested inside a support sling. "Then you know the situation." "I know Karad's rest suffered catastrophic industrial damage." "We noticed." "Compact recovery doctrine recommends full evacuation." Talun looked toward Mara. The human engineer stood behind the admiral and silently shook her head. "No," Talun said. Morse Thane's vapor brightened. "The moon's primary economic purpose has been compromised." "Yes." "Reconstruction may require decades." "Yes." "Several mining zones are permanently unusable." "Yes." "Then why remained?" Talun looked through the observation window. The control chamber had no view of the surface. Only rock, cables, repair lights, workers passing through the tunnel. He had spent years believing Karad's rest existed because it produced metal. The Orash believed the same thing. They had both been wrong. "The moon's primary purpose is housing the people who live here," Talun said. The admiral's vapor shifted. "That is not how strategic viability is calculated." "No." Talun rested one hand on the console. "It is how we calculate it now." Mara smiled. The admiral did not. Compact Command began revising Karad's classification. The old record stated: military population, 0. Defensive capacity, none. Strategic value, industrial. Talun changed it. Population, 107,400 survivors. Defensive capacity, ask before landing. Strategic value, people. Compact officials objected to the wording. The miners approved it unanimously. The Battle of Karad's Rest spread through the frontier. Other mining colonies requested the full report. Compact Command sent a sanitized version. The miners found the unsanitized one. Within months, cargo rails across the compact gained manual control stations. Refineries installed emergency pressure routes. Old drilling platforms returned to service. Shelter maps stopped relying on central networks. Mining unions began conducting invasion drills disguised as industrial safety inspections. Human engineers claimed this was not militarization. It was redundancy. No one believed them. No one stopped them. The Orash changed too. They stopped assuming civilian infrastructure was harmless. They bombarded mining settlements from greater distances. They deployed seismic projectors before landing. They began killing engineers on site. That fear became the first clear evidence that humanity's influence had changed the war. The Orash had entered compact space believing resistance belonged to soldiers. Neuralis taught them civilian ships could answer distress calls. Serene taught them cargo crews could sustain fleets. Vaskir taught them wounded soldiers could hold a line. Karad's Rest taught them something worse. Civilization itself could become defensive terrain. Myra returned to the equatorial launch shaft 6 months after the battle. The crater had cooled. A memorial platform stood above it. Fragments of the Orash command carrier remained fused into the stone. Talon joined her. His injured arm had healed badly. Myra walked with a metal support beside one leg. Neither mentioned it. Below them, reconstruction crews installed new magnetic rails. Talon looked toward the work. I ordered the freight loop decommissioned permanently. You did. They are rebuilding it. Yes. Did you authorize that? No. Did you? Also no. Talon watched human and Galun engineers lower a new rail segment into the tunnel. What are they calling it? Mara checked the construction markings. Civilian emergency, cargo acceleration, and orbital debris management system. That is dishonest. Extremely. It is a weapon. Myra considered, it can also move cargo. Talon's scales shifted with restrained amusement. The human looked toward the stars. Still no warships assigned to us. Compact Command considers the system low priority. Comforting. Talon opened the memorial recording. Sava's final words played through the platform. Was this in the emergency plan? No, good. The message ended. Talon looked toward Myra. Did you know the moon could fire into orbit? No. You behaved as though you did. I knew the equipment could do more than the manual claimed. That is not the same. It usually is. They stood in silence above the crater. Then a distress signal entered Karad's Rest. It came from a mixed-species refugee cruiser named the Long Road Home. The vessel had entered a damaged Cinderline route after escaping the occupied world of Elsinore. 24,000 refugees were aboard. Its navigation system was failing. Its life support network reported unexplained interruptions. The captain requested shelter at Karad's Rest. Talon opened a response. This is Superintendent Talon Kesher. You are cleared to approach. Myra studied the signal. Something about it troubled her. What? Talon asked. The life support failures. Damage. Maybe. The refugee cruiser emerged at the edge of the system. Its hull carried impact scars. Escape modules had been welded across its sides. Thousands of life signs filled the internal scan. Myra looked closer. Several moved through sealed maintenance spaces, against traffic flow, toward the reactor. Talon saw them too. Stowaways. Myra's expression hardened. No. The refugee cruiser continued toward Karad's Rest. Inside its crowded corridors, something wearing the shape of a survivor opened a locked service door. For the first time, the Orash were not approaching as a fleet. They were already aboard. If you enjoyed this story, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What was your favorite moment? What would you have done in their place? Leave a comment below. I read every one. If you'd like to help the channel grow, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story from the Human Archive. Thanks for listening.